Suddenly, in a city in Korea, the police start discovering one dead body after another. They suspect that these incidents are the work of a serial killer. The investigation begins, but all they find are numerous mobile phones. So, is a hacker behind all of this? Let's find out. The story begins with a girl named Nami. She was very lively and always loved to stay cheerful. Her father owned a cafe, and she would occasionally visit to help him out. Her mother was no longer in this world. Every morning, she would only wake up when her phone alarm rang. She loved using her phone and couldn't stay away from it for even a second. One night, while returning home on a public bus, she accidentally fell asleep. Because of this, she mistakenly left her phone on the bus. A while later, a stranger picked it up. The next morning, one of Nami's friends came to visit her at home. As soon as Nami woke up, she started looking for her phone. After searching the entire house and not finding it, she became anxious. So, she called her own number from her friend's phone. We see that a man answers the call, but responds in a woman's voice. He says, "I found your phone on the bus." Nami then shares the location of a cafe and asks, "If it's not too much trouble, could you bring the phone to this cafe?" The person on the other end agrees. After hanging up, the stranger repeatedly tries to unlock Nami's phone, but no matter what he does, he cannot get in. Frustrated, he smashes the phone in anger. Meanwhile, the police are searching the forest and come across a young woman's dead body. It had rained heavily the night before, washing away all possible evidence. Because of this, the police have no way of figuring out who committed such a brutal crime. To investigate the case, the police call Detective Woo-sing. After analyzing small pieces of evidence, he realizes that the murderer is actually his own son, Jun. Jun is the same guy who currently has Nami's phone. Meanwhile, Nami was helping her father at their cafe. Just then, Jun calls her, again speaking in a woman's voice. He tells Nami that he accidentally dropped her phone and it broke. So, he took it to a shop for repairs. Jun then gives Nami the shop's address and asks her to pick up the phone from there. A little while later, Nami reaches the shop to collect her phone. There, we see that Jun himself is working as an employee. He had carefully covered his face with a cap and mask. He hands Nami a form to fill out. With no other option, Nami is forced to write down her personal address and phone unlock code. As soon as Jun gets Nami's password, he secretly installs a spyware code on her phone. Then, he returns the phone to her. Now, everything Nami does, every call, text, or movement, Jun can hear and see through her phone. From this point on, we see Jun constantly spying on Nami through her phone's camera. The next evening, he even visits her cafe. Naturally, Nami doesn't recognize him, as the first time she saw him, he was wearing a cap and mask. Jun orders a special drink from the cafe. Since he already knew all of Nami's likes and dislikes, he talks to her in a way that she would find interesting. He even shares details about himself, telling her that he works at a software company. Before leaving, Jun gives Nami his business card. However, her father had been secretly observing their conversation the entire time. The next morning, Nami wakes up late and is unable to reach her office on time. She works in the marketing department of a coffee company, where she manages online promotions for their products. Nami was an excellent employee. Impressed by her honesty and dedication, her boss calls her in and offers her a new project with double the salary. However, he tells her not to disclose this offer to anyone in the office. Meanwhile, Detective Woo-sing was informing his wife about their son's involvement in the murders. But Jun's mother refused to believe it. She said, "You must be mistaken. Our son could never do something like this." In the middle of their conversation, the detective receives a message from his assistant. The team had successfully tracked Jun's location. Without wasting any time, Woo-sing rushes out. Following the location data, they arrive at one of Jun's houses. There, they collect substantial evidence, including a photo of the murdered girl. Seeing all this, the detective becomes even more certain that his son is the killer. Additionally, they find several other phones belonging to different women. However, before they can investigate further, Jun returns home. Jun was extremely smart. He instantly realized that someone was inside his house. From outside, Jun spots his father. Instead of going inside, he secretly takes a picture of the detective and sends it to his phone. Along with the photo, he writes, "Dad, how are you?" Detective Woo-sing immediately realizes that Jun is nearby. The moment he steps outside to look around, Jun seizes the opportunity, sneaks into the house, and hides all the evidence. After that, he returns to Nami's cafe and orders the same juice as before. But this time, Nami's father says, That juice is no longer available. He deliberately refuses to serve Jun. On the way home, Nami's father warns her to stay away from Jun. He says, "That guy is a liar. He's only visited my cafe twice, but he told me he's been here many times. And from the way he spoke, I feel like he knows everything about us." Meanwhile, Jun listens to their entire conversation through Nami's phone. That night, Jun sends a text from Nami's number to her father. "Dad, open this link." Thinking it's a message from his daughter, Nami's father clicks on the link without hesitation. But as soon as he does, spyware gets installed on his phone. Now, Jun can spy on both Nami and her father at all times. Hearing what Nami's father said about him makes Jun furious. So, later that night, when Nami's father steps outside, Jun attacks him from behind and ties him up inside the house. Not only that, Jun starts hiding inside Nami's house as well. That same night, he logs into Nami's office group chat and, using her ID, sends vulgar and offensive messages to all her colleagues and even her boss. On top of that, Jun leaks the news about Nami's double salary offer. Elsewhere in the city, the police discover 8 dead bodies buried underground. Due to the heavy rain, the soil had shifted, exposing the corpses. By now, finding dead bodies like this had become almost normal. The next morning, Nami wakes up and checks her messages. Her mind goes blank. "I never sent these messages. Who did this from my phone?" Desperate to fix the situation, she rushes to the office. But when she arrives, everyone is furious with her. "Get out of here right now!" Nami tries to explain everything to her boss. "You know me. I would never do something like this. Someone must have hacked my phone and sent those messages." But her boss refuses to listen. He shoves her out of the office and slams the door behind her. Just like that, Jun keeps destroying every bit of happiness in Nami's life. Crying, Nami runs to her best friend and tells her everything that has happened. Horrified, her friend immediately takes her to the police station. There, they file a complaint, saying that someone has hacked Nami's phone and is using it to ruin her life. They plead with the police to track down the culprit, but the officers refuse to take the case. One of them says, "From what you're describing, it sounds like her phone has been hacked. Finding a suspect like this is nearly impossible." Hearing this, Nami's friend becomes enraged. She shouts and argues with the officers, but they still refuse to take action. And Jun hears all of this through Nami's phone. So, he comes up with a plan. A few moments later, Nami receives a message from her father's phone. He sent a message saying, "I have some work today, so the coffee shop will be closed." But the message wasn't actually sent by Nami's father, it was sent by Jun, because Jun didn't want Nami to realize that her father had disappeared. Later, Nami sat in her coffee shop with her friend, discussing everything that had happened. That's when Jun arrived. Nami thought that maybe Jun could help her with these problems since he had told her he was a software engineer. The two friends explained everything to Jun, even handing over her phone for him to check. After analyzing it, Jun said, "Someone has installed spyware on your phone. It's a program that allows another person to take full control of your phone remotely." Then, Jun took Nami aside and said, "Only someone close to you could have done this. Maybe the person you trust the most is the one who's causing you the most harm. Think about it. Who else knows your phone's password?" The only 2 people who knew Nami's phone password were her father and her best friend. Hearing Jun's words, Nami started suspecting her own best friend. But instead of saying anything, she went back and sat silently in front of her friend. Her friend then showed her a video, the news report about the 8 dead bodies that police had found on a mountain the day before. Despite such shocking news, Nami didn't react at all. She was so overwhelmed with anger that she suddenly confronted her best friend. "Why did you do this to me? You're the only one who knows all my secrets and my phone's password. Now tell me, why did you betray me?" Her friend was stunned and replied, "How could you even think that I would do something like this to you? I don't need a friend like you. Never call me again." Saying this, her friend left in tears. Jun stood outside, watching everything unfold, his plan working perfectly. Back home, Nami couldn't stop thinking about her best friend. She felt deep regret for accusing her like that. "I shouldn't have said those things. Maybe I made a mistake. My best friend would never do this." Tears streamed down her face as she kept thinking about it. In frustration, she threw her phone, accidentally cracking the screen once again. Meanwhile, Detective Hu-sing was deeply troubled by the discovery of the 8 dead bodies. If I don't stop Jun now, who knows how many more people he will kill? Because it was now clear. Jun had murdered those 8 people. Determined to catch him, the detective and his assistant set out to track Jun down. Eventually, they discovered the secret location where Jun had been installing spyware on people's phones. There, they found the phones and records of all 8 victims, but shockingly, there was also information on a 9th person. And that 9th person was Nami, the detective gasped. I've seen this girl's photo at Jun's house before. But before they could investigate further, Jun cleverly erased all the evidence. The detective's assistant said urgently, "It's not too late, sir. We can still save Nami." Just then, Nami walked into the shop. She had come there simply to get her broken phone repaired. But now, she finally learned the horrifying truth. The shopkeeper who had installed spyware on her phone was Jun himself. A wave of pain and betrayal washed over Nami as she realized, because of Jun, she had lost her job and her best friend had abandoned her. Nami says, "He had been right in front of me all this time. But looking at him, his actions, I never suspected anything." Now, Nami is determined to take revenge on Jun. She tells the detective that she will lure Jun into their coffee shop to trap him. Then, they will catch him. To make sure Jun doesn't suspect anything, she plans to use this phone. The detective likes Nami's idea. According to the plan, Nami texts Jun and invites him to the cafe. The detective, along with his assistant, hides outside the cafe. But Jun is truly very clever. Would he really fall so easily into their trap? He completely changes his appearance to meet Nami. He cuts his hair short, removes his glasses, and when he gets out of the car and starts heading to the cafe, the detective and his assistant try to catch him, but due to the dim lighting and his new look, they fail to recognize him. Instead, Jun acts surprised and says, "I will report you guys. You, police officers, can't just harass anyone you see on the street like this." Forced to apologize, the two of them let him go, and Jun leaves. They think maybe Jun has figured out their whole plan, which is why he didn't show up here. Just then, the detective gets a call from the police station. The station informs him that it has been discovered that the detective's son, Jun, is the one who killed those 8 people. As a result, the detective is removed from the case. The detective knew how dangerous Jun was, but what does it matter that he's been removed from the case? He wants to arrest his son Jun with his own hands. Before leaving, he tells Nami, "Don't stay alone. Let me take you home." Before they leave, Nami takes the SIM card out of her phone, puts it into another phone, and discards the old phone. While dropping her off at home, the detective gives her a card so she can contact him if needed. Nami enters the house and sees that her father is sleeping comfortably. So, she doesn't wake him up and heads to her room. During this time, she gets another message from Jun. The message says that due to some urgent work, he couldn't meet her today. After reading the message, Nami calls Jun. She hears phone ringing sounds coming from the floor above. Nami realizes that Jun might be in her house. So, she quickly runs to call her father. But her father isn't there. Instead, there are pillows piled up in his place. Terrified, she quickly calls the detective. But we all know how clever Jun is. He has hacked Nami's phone, so she runs quickly toward the hall. But Jun is already there, waiting for her. Nami immediately asks about her father and says, "What did you do to my dad?" Jun then shows her a video of Nami's father. In the video, Nami's father is unconscious, and a knife is held against his throat. Seeing this, Nami bursts into tears. She says, "I will do whatever you ask, just let my father go." Jun then says, "Now message the detective and tell him that you are fine at home. Make sure he doesn't worry about you." He then takes Nami to their bathroom, where he had tied Nami's father in the bathtub with a rope. Holding a knife to Nami's father's throat, he told Nami to tape himself up. If Nami stopped even a little, Jun would turn on the water in the bathtub. As a result, Nami's father was drowning in the water. Now, Jun taped Nami's mouth and submerged him in the water of the same bathtub with his father. Just like his previous victims, Jun took a final picture of Nami before killing him. Then, he closed the bathroom door and went outside. When he came out, he noticed a card from the detective lying on the ground, the same card the detective had given to Nami. It said, "If you're in danger, call me. Don't message." Jun realized that he had trapped himself by his own mistake. Just then, he heard the sounds of people outside. The detective and his assistant had entered the house by that time. Jun was about to hit the assistant with a piece of iron, but the detective grabbed him. The detective pressed a gun to Jun's head, preventing him from killing the assistant. The detective then began to beat his own son severely and asked, "Where is Jun?" Jun replied, "Dad, I am your son Jun. Don't you recognize me? Please don't hit me anymore, Dad." Meanwhile, the assistant helped Nami and his father out of the water. While Nami regained consciousness, his father was still unconscious. Meanwhile, the detective was checking Jun's bag. This is where we see the biggest twist of the story. The detective found a phone belonging to his own son in the bag. After checking everything, the detective realized that the real Jun, his son, had been murdered by this person. And the one claiming to be Jun in front of him was actually a serial killer, whose first victim had been Jun. After killing the real Jun, this killer took on Jun's identity and continued to kill others. In truth, Jun had been a good person. He had finished his work and was on his way back to his parents. But the serial killer had killed him before he could return. After hearing the news of his son's death, the detective was about to kill the serial killer. But then the killer said, "If you kill me, who will talk to your wife pretending to be Jun?" Think about it. If your wife finds out that her child has been killed, she might die from the shock. Upon hearing this, the detective couldn't bring himself to kill the serial killer. But just then, Nami came from behind, snatched the gun from the detective, and shot the fake Jun several times. The serial killer died immediately. At the same time, Nami's father regained consciousness. Within moments, reporters arrived at the scene, and everyone was taking pictures and videos of the event on their phones. Nami and his father were taken to the hospital in an ambulance. After this incident, all the brutalities of the serial killer went viral on social media. A few months after this event, we see another scene where Nami and his father have fully recovered. Nami was working in his cafe with his father and best friend. At that moment, he noticed an unfamiliar person filming him from a distance. Nami stood back and watched this, feeling something strange. The situation felt odd to him. The movie ends with this suspenseful moment. I hope you all enjoyed today's video. That's all for today. I'll see you again with a new video. Until then, goodbye.